This is the Parents in Sport podcast. Amazing guests, honest conversations, topics that matter.
Welcome to season 2 of the Parents in Sport podcast. I am your host, Gordon MacLelland, and I'm delighted to be joined today by two legends from the world of squash, husband and wife team, Daniel and Laura Massaro. Daniel and Laura, thank you for joining us on the show.
Great, thanks for having us on.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'm really excited about today. As we sort of talked off air, I'm really keen that we bring squash into the limelight. I was watching a bit on Sky Sports the other week and then was sat there reflecting, thinking, this is on so infrequently, I never get the opportunity to watch. And I did enjoy watching, so it'll be fascinating to hear your experiences in the game, and I'm sure our listeners will be as well. Can you just tell our listeners a little bit about yourselves and your background, and I guess what is quite a unique story with your relationship as husband and wife and coach and player?
Well, I'll start. So I'm a former professional squash player, retired in May 2019, which now seems like perfect timing given everything that's happened since then. Was fortunate enough to probably achieve more than I ever thought that I would in the game of squash for various reasons, which I'm sure we'll discuss. But managed to become world champion, world number 1, and British Open champion, which is like our Wimbledon of squash, maybe the most prestigious one. So yeah, really proud of that. And Danny has been part of my journey the whole way through, from kind of, I guess just simple like boyfriend, husband to start, and then obviously played himself. So part of what I would have called, a huge part of my team, and almost created a really good bridge as well between my coach, who was based in Harrogate, and I think as we sort of went about tackling getting to the very top of the game together, he just became, it was his journey as well as my own, and we went after it together, and that's what I think made it special, and it made it something that we achieved together and over the course of probably my most of my career, but certainly for perhaps the last 7 or 8 years.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. What's your view? Funny, yeah. What are your what's your background?
Well, yeah, I've been a teacher really, and since 1997, worked in colleges to start with, teaching GCSEs and then BTECs and A-levels, the old HND, HNC stuff. And then in about 2006, I think that was the year I decided to leave work and go on the tour with Laura and decide to really coach her and be at all the tournaments and fly around the world. And we did that like 13 years. Amongst that time, I carried on working at the University of Central Lancashire in lecturing in sports performance and sports, performance psychology and all these things. I trained in psychology, did a lot of courses, particularly neuro-linguistic programming, for about 4 years, which was brilliant, and all the sort of things around that, not just the NLP bit. Started then designed and ran like a master's program in coaching and this elite level practice thing that came in at the university then for the national governing bodies. So I started all my lecturing and research and all those things started to be at that sort of performance level. So I had this dual life of being on the tour, working with certain players, but mainly Laura, and being an academic as well. And that led me to, in 2016, begin a PhD on how one might live well through a sporting life, a kind of alternative or even slight rejection to this well-being concept that's flying around and has just emerged in the last few years, and basically understanding how turbulent and textured and a lived life in sport is.
Absolutely.
Not this conceptual view of it that you often get from the academic side. So yeah, that's where that was our background. So I always had this dual thing going on of being on the tour, immersed in the feelings and how it is to be an athlete and a coach, and and this distanced, more theoretical, generalized view that all these coaching models throw out that are useful but are totally different from the live thing itself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, isn't it? I was yesterday having one of my grumpy days with academia. Funnily enough, I think our work splits opinion. I think we're popular amongst 50% of the academic field and not popular amongst the other 50%. And 50% think it's brilliant that the stuff you're doing brings into the spotlight some of the things that have been encountered, as opposed to people sitting and coming up with their own research ideas that have no practical element. I actually was grumpy yesterday when I was listening to something about parent-coach perspectives and how parents can struggle with that relationships and how coaches see them as not the enemy, but as being a sort of bit of a pain and not understanding and only concentrating on their own child. And I sort of went off on one of my tangents as if to say, do we really need to research that? We're out there all the time. If I sat with a group of coaches and said, what do you find challenging about parents, which you do at the Coach Ed workshop, they'll give you hundreds of those every time you see them. Likewise, if you say to parents, what do you find challenging about coaches, then do it. And it's like, well, if we just immersed ourselves in the sport, like you clearly did, being involved in it, you pick up a lot of these bits of information anyway. And I think it's more realistic, as you say, then, to be able to work with it and I think involve other people in it, importantly. But I think academia, I don't know what your views are, I think academia is changing a little bit. I think they're beginning to recognise that they need to come away from that and have a far more practical use to the work going on.
Yeah, I think it's good. I see it as difference. I think it's good to have the difference. I don't see them as as oppositional. When, I didn't want to come on down on even the book I wrote, The Winning Parent. It was very embedded and it tried to put people back into their own lives. But, a lot of my study's been on existential phenomenology, which is an ontology. In other words, what it is to even be a person in the world, which sounds intense, but it's more philosophically deeper than we're all just blank vessels running around, just need to be filled up with information and we'll just do the right behaviours. It's a bit more of the absolute complexity of what it even is just to get through a day. Yeah. And the ambiguity of all the small, tiny little things that go on and the way life's often really absurd as well. And all these little things seem to be always conveniently bypassed and put down as some sort of logic. In exactly the same way, they're probably up to about 27 things you now need to do to be Emma Raducanu. It's absolutely absurd that list has even begun. People just can't say, she's brilliant and I don't know why. They can't leave it alone.
No.
But well done. It was lovely to watch you, and leave it. They have to analyse it to bits.
Well, yeah, and I mean, all the topics are coming out, aren't they, all the time? What did she do to get to the top? Just as like people try and chase, well, how did that footballer get there? And then try to apply that model perhaps with their own children. And actually, it's totally out of context, doesn't translate in any way whatsoever. Just because it worked for them won't work for somebody else. And but then I suppose what everybody's doing is trying to find that golden ticket, which everybody's always done in sport, isn't it? With any young people, we haven't got a crystal ball. They're trying to find things that, do you specialise? Don't you specialise? Do you have to do that much training or not that much? Everybody's trying to find the perfect ingredients almost.
Yeah, and I think that's what I've tried to point at with my study, that's fine. That just as long as you know what it is, that's linked very closely to commercialism, solutionism, capitalism, selling, running your businesses, getting clients. If you're a coach or a parent, there's so much responsibility on finding that solution these days, the wise solution. Even with the vaccines and everybody, a lot of people have seen it as an intellectual type game, where you won't catch me out, I'm clever. A lot of the people, I've had this bit of information, I can look after us, don't worry. It's almost like you always have to top trump with information because you've got the new business idea that can solve a problem for somebody and you've got the solution, and that's crept in. you know, especially since the early 2000s in sport, with Clive Woodward, with all his critical non-essential type approach and his business ideas to sport, Brailsford and all his marginal gains and all these things, all popular science books, all the sports books, all the companies, all the podcasts, all these things, they basically have created a culture of solution. Read this, watch this, do this, find this little thing, you will be safe, we will get you to be this. Now, who can blame people for that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
But what's been left behind is the sheer absurdity of an unfolding, random, absurd life.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of other ways to think about the world than just a solution-focused approach. So that's fine. It's I have no problem with it, but know what it is and know what it isn't. And I think if you can have that perspective, I don't think you need to set them up as oppositions.
No.
Like the academics, what do they know? And you need to be a lived experience person, and vice versa. I think you can set up life.
Oh, I'm totally with you on that. I mean, obviously, everything you do, just very much like your book was as well. Everything we do is underpinned by some form of scientific fact. You know, I have the team at Lancaster Uni who check up that I'm not going off on tangents from the real world to make sure that is there. But then I want to, from my point of view, you want to work openly with these people, because in effect, you know, working with parents in sport is just, I guess, taking sports psychology, but making it accessible, or making it more real. And, you know, one of the big things for us, you know, from a starting point was that, you know, it had to all be done in language people could understand, reflect and relate to. And we wanted everybody in the middle of, let's say, Merseyside to be able to understand it. You know, and now I know you can't always simplify things to that. That wasn't what you were trying to do, but actually what you were trying to do was make this something very real life, based on science, based on the world of sport, what's actually happening there, and hope that people think, well, again, you know, not telling people how to parent, but at least getting people to have a think about some of the options that may be different ways or better ways, or challenge themselves, which is very much what your book does.
Yeah, I think if you can get people to join in with the decision making and take that responsibility in a very simple way, don't put the responsibility on the solution or on the book or on the 10-point model or the growth mindset thing or the resilience training you've done. If you can literally, you know, like keep a mind's eye on your own decision and take part in it and take that responsibility, I think then, and I know that's difficult because it's, you know, you don't know which way to go, but at least you always have gone back into your own life, made choices, and maybe that's the biggest lesson of all you can give your kid, to keep having that ability to do that, not to follow some random new popular system that just happens to be passing through the era for that 2-3 year period, and then we're on to something else trendy that's you know, caught on. I think always I like getting children to take part in their own decision making, not as, you know, to develop independent, intelligent thinker model, all that stuff and all this motivation theory. It just basically just literally mean, like, you've got some responsibility there to make a choice. Which one are you going to choose? And I think that's one of the best gifts that sport itself gives. You know, I get asked to do a lot of psychology, you know, with children, because I work a lot with professional players, and then, could you just speak to this child? I won't do it, because for me, the sport is the psychologist. You know, and unless, you know, it's chronic and really bad, and they just need someone to talk to for 20 minutes. It's not a session, it's just someone to talk to. I'll help them that way. But the concept of a child needing sports psychology to me is unbelievable, because the sport is basically saying, here I am, can you do this? No, you can't. Then work it out or go and do something else.
Yeah.
So there's competition sport that you clearly are struggling with, no worries. Carry on playing that sport, get coached, play with your friends, have a laugh, still enjoy it, take it or leave it. But if you want to compete at me, you know, if the sport could talk, then, and you want to do all the things that come with competition and pressure and all these things and people watching and expectations and money spent and then if you can't handle me, don't worry about it. It's tough. It doesn't mean that I don't like you or that you're no good. It just means you can't quite yet complete me or get a hold of me. Just go back to playing with your friends and and I think if you help children know the difference between that, again, I think you're being straight with them and you're not trying to plaster up sometimes problems that aren't even there. The simple fact is they just can't do it yet at that time.
Yeah, but I think that comes to parents, just the whole sports parenting piece as well. I'm sure you get that, whenever you talk to parents, let's say, who haven't got backgrounds in sport or haven't got backgrounds in education or sports science or whatever that may be, their way of informing themselves or their way of behaving is basically based on how society perceives sport or how we see it on the media or those gimmicks, like you say. And basically what they try and do is try and translate what they see on the TV and bring it into an under 10 game. Can we make it look? Can we make the under 10 version look like the adult version as quickly as possible? And if we do, we've done a really good job. But neglecting to understand that a 10-year-old has very different needs and very different requirements, and that's why I think this work's so important. I think all this work's vital because we've got to be better at separating the two and doing the right things with sport when children are younger, and they will find their own paths in time if the environments are engaging at the very beginning and are managed in an age appropriate way. I've had a son in a football academy for 3 years, signed a contract at 9 and was released, and we've had to deal with the aftermath of that in the last few months. And thankfully he's now loving football more than he's ever done. He's out playing with his mates and he's playing at school and doing it, and you learn as you go. But it is that, you look back on certain bits of your journey and think, yeah, there was lots of benefits to that. And then you look at some of it and say, God, goodness me, you should have known a little bit better that some of that wasn't necessarily a good thing and handled it a bit. And that shows how difficult, and why I'm so passionate about the sports parenting piece, is because you can know everything as well. You can read your book, you can listen to conversations like this, you can try and inform yourself, but actually you still make horrible mistakes at it, and you still get the judgment wrong because I don't know, there's just something about the whole environment that sort of sucks you in and spits you out sometimes.
Well, that's what I've basically been saying in my PhD. You're living your life in the world. You're not on the sidelines watching it as if you're some observer with a rational head. You're living in the world. You're a being in the world. You know what I mean? You're thrown into the world. You didn't get asked to be put here. You're thrown in. You've given your set of circumstances in the country you were born, with the parents and everything you have. You're thrown in. Deal with it. And you blag your way through it as best you can. But you're always taking part in your immediate day, and it's bypassed. All that stuff's conveniently bypassed to a more theoretical, abstract, generalized view of whole situations. And I think people have forgotten that in your lifeness, that everydayness, if you will, and it doesn't get talked about in books because it's very hard to pin down. And I think when you watch sports more nowadays, and see more and more, I've just been talking to a girl now actually, and about this from the States, where her parents, she's 25, and her parents feel the need to chip in every time she's played a squash tournament somewhere. She's just played one in Egypt, with their opinions and things. And I said, well, it's hard to blame them because they watch sport now on TV, and the analysis of the match is as entertaining or more important than the match itself. So you can't really blame people for this detached, all-seeing, all-knowing I-knowness, with Twitter now as well and everything, and the punditry is almost as important as the experience that the players have had and are going through. And I think when you see Gareth Southgate, or you see maybe some of the best coaches, they try and say that in a way. They don't get arsey with the criticism or the punditry or the fact that people are analysing. They know that that's part of life now, but they just kind of, put into play that things just randomly happen, like missing penalties and things on certain occasions when you could have won, you could have lost, but it's you can't really blame people for over analysing and thinking they have all the solutions, because that's when I was younger, you'd watch a FA Cup final and literally a minute after the final whistle, it was onto another television programme.
Yeah, or you'd be out in the garden reenacting the goals, wouldn't you? I was looking. Yeah. I was looking at
it's an hour of analysis, isn't it, on the telly? So you all end up thinking that talking about the thing you're watching is the thing you're watching, but it isn't.
No, absolutely. Now, talking of the real life and the lived experience, because I think this will be a fascinating one. How was it being back to your world of squash? How was it, Laura? Being husband and wife and coach and athlete, and what were the best bits of that? And then do you remember any of the sort of big challenges or any moments where it was just the worst thing ever?
I think there was a lot of both, really. A huge amount of positives and a few negatives along the way. The positives were that we were trying to kind of go after a bit of a goal together. I had someone to travel with and help me and support me and, do everything that I needed to do to be the best in the world. And, a lot of the decisions that we made together were about whether or not I could make it to the top of the world of squash. The downsides were obviously a little bit more kind of along the pressure that brings, that someone's given up their life to travel with you, and not given up their life, they want to be there, but arguably financially we're spending double every trip, so it felt like there was a lot of pressure there. And we had several discussions about that, and I talk about it a lot in my book that's just come out about the role clarification stuff, which was huge. And just being able to have those open, honest conversations that actually help you get a better performance out on court anyway. And I think it was a learning process for us both. I'm sure you've had multiple conversations with husbands, wives, kids and parents, where you find in your own individual way and how it works for you, and what worked for us wouldn't perhaps work for everybody. And Danny changed a lot over the years. I think, having just listened to you talk a lot about his book and the parents, what I saw was a lot of parents asking for the book, because Danny did a really good job of almost bridging the gap between player and parent, and they were from the back of the court asking for, like, when are you going to put all this down in a book to help us? Because although he's saying like he won't help a kid with psychology, like where I guess you officially sit down and talk to them, I think there's more going on within the actual sessions themselves. And I think a lot of what he does is educating the parents while almost educating the kids. And I think that's where a lot of coaches perhaps get it a little bit wrong, where they see the parents as, the opposition or someone who's a bit of a pain in the backside. And so I think when it came to our relationship, he sort of did that with me and my coach. He was a really good bridge between the two of us. He was a really good bridge between kind of me getting the most out of the people around me. And it didn't start off like that, did they? The very first story of Danny's book is very much about how he got it wrong to start, and how much pressure maybe he didn't realise he was putting me under, but it was just growing together. I
think you go through phases in life. I think life's a lot about phases, really, and also you've got lines in your life, haven't you? Like, you've got your career line, your parent line, your mates, you've got your hobby, arts, so you have all these different aspects of your life, and on some of those aspects you're further down the line than some of the others, and so you feel a little bit sometimes like you're not confident in that area, you're not in some areas you're really confident and you're further down that path. So I found that early on in my 20s I was very much, like you are in your 20s in your career, wanting to build it up and make it and prove myself and get told I was brilliant and not let Laura down and not let everyone down, be a superhero. And I think I just mentioned in some of my conclusions actually that instead of trying to be Superman anymore, I sort of turned into Alfred the butler for Batman. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
Even if they were going to go out and get hurt, or if they were going to, it's really hard skill. It sounds easy to just, that idea of being the zero, really, that the astronauts talk about when they go to the space station. Don't be a +1, don't be a -1, but just be the zero who's reliable, confident, excellent. And you learn how to be a bit more of that. But still, there are, so you've got that as a general thing through phases. You mature, you've less of a chip on your shoulder, you've less to prove, you've post success. I think that's massive. When you've had big success, you go through a little phase immediately, I found, of being cocky and a bit, I know everything, and do it how we did it, we're amazing. And then after a while, when you can't keep repeating it, you think, right, well, I've nothing to prove anyway, I'll just carry on. And that's maturing. So I think if you mature as a person in your life, which is obviously dropping off your own shocking stuff, your own issues, your own baggage, I think maturity is dropping off your childhood issues. So if you can then get over yourself, laugh at yourself, don't get too serious in the job you do, like you are the most, and I see a lot of coaches and parents get way over serious about themselves and the children, and they lose the ability to laugh at themselves and things like that. I think that's important. So all these small things that you keep talking about to parents and children and putting them down and making them laugh and embarrassing them and taking the mickey and using sarcasm but not bullying them, and all these natural sort of playful skills are actually helping the psychology all along.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
it's hard to do that when you're proving yourself as a coach or a parent yourself.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. I think of the young coach that I was, and I had a strange coaching career in rugby because I think I was the youngest level 3 rugby coach in the country at 23, and I did mine backwards. I coached men at 24. Even having older people who were 38, then did elite under 18s, then coached a couple of sort of national championship under 13 sides in sevens that won, and then finished off with under 7s. So I went from seniors all the way back in reverse. Most people would work up the other way. But without a doubt, my last 5 or 10 years before I left education this last summer, I just felt like it was the better version of me. The early years were just spent fighting your own corner, trying to prove yourself. Could you win it again? Could you be better than everybody else? All your decisions, a bit more dictatorial with your coach, and it was my way, it was the only way, whatever else. And then the last 10 years is just a sheer joy of, well, we'll do it because this is the right way of doing it, and we'll do it because I can have a laugh and joke that, that didn't quite work out, or we did that, and the dialogues and everything. But I always feel that I have a lot of sympathy with younger coaches, as well, inexperienced coaches who are trying to, I guess, find their own feet and perceive what success actually means to them now, with lots of people saying, well, it's not all about that. It's easier to sit there and say, no, it's not all about winning when you've won everything. It's not quite. It's my point. Yeah, absolutely. It's not quite. It's not as easy when you're trying to.
The pandemic, didn't you, with people saying, "Oh, I've actually enjoyed the time off." Well, they were normally rich people with gardens. They weren't living in flats. Stuck and basically you're still very susceptible as well to the in the moment disappointment and emotion of losses and victories. It's not that you're this saint, this, like some Buddha person who's just constantly wise, and I think it's good to go there sometimes and lose your stuff in yourself to remind yourself how easy it is. So you have empathy for parents, you have empathy for players, and you say, look, I'm not perfect. I did lose my cool a bit there, and I wish I hadn't have said that actually. And they almost like, they say, oh, well, I really respect you anyway because you're sort of consistently like wise, you're consistently solid. But even you can have a bad day and an hour where you say the wrong thing.
Yeah.
So they kind of go, well, even the ultimate, in their mind, the person I look up to still is a normal person and has ups and downs. So maybe that's okay for me to be like that. So you're not turning yourself into some robotic, bland, robot person. You're still frail, even though you're down the track post success and all these things. So I think that's that for me.
Yeah.
When you put, and that puts me straight back to thinking, oh, it's not easy, this stuff. And I think with Laura on the tour, when we were even at the very, very end, when it was obvious, it was coming to the end and the movement had just slowed down and it was hard to keep the levels.
Was that yours, Danny, or was that Laura?
Oh, well, definitely me. That my movement slowed down 20 years ago. But you still had that instinctive, protective disappointment, high when she lost, and it was like within 10 minutes, 5 minutes or whatever, and sometimes it didn't really appear, but it still appeared. You could just get rid of it and the perspective was there.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
But you wouldn't want to lose some of that, you wouldn't want to lose some of that fire that you sometimes need. It's not all about popular, nice, liberal stuff in sport.
No.
Sometimes the hurtful comment or the thingy, you can overdo praise and you can overdo hurting stuff, but sometimes they all have a function.
Yeah, they've all got a place, haven't they?
Sometimes the truth's spoken in anger, because
and that's part of the emotion of sport, isn't it? It'll make you laugh.
Yeah.
At the start of all of our parent workshops, and I sort of sign off a bit of a disclaimer, which is along the lines of, I'm not here to preach to you. I'm certainly not here to tell you how to parent, because that isn't really cool. And the third one is, you have to understand that I'm also not one of these happy, clappy, laissez-faire parents who doesn't value winning. And I feel the need that I have to say that, because in all this sort of, I think my little 9-year-old daughter would describe it as cupcakes and rainbows. It would be her way of describing it, that sort of mood. Well, actually, it isn't. Sport isn't all cupcakes and rainbows. Winning and competition is an integral part of it. It's part of the whole process. Maybe how we frame it sometimes in young people's sport, and the fact we don't place any value on anything else and we focus purely on that as a success criteria is the issue. But as you say, I think we've got to be careful that it doesn't become too frilly, because all these things, these levels of challenge, these levels of failure, these disappointment are all valuable building blocks, whether we're talking sport or whether we're talking, growing up as in the world, never mind whether we're in sport. And sport's still one of those amazing vehicles to learn. Not the only vehicle, however, but it's still one of the safest vehicles to learn a lot of those skills. Laura, just on parents, how were your parents with you? What are your memories of mum and dad with your squash?
My dad was definitely fairly strict, army background. And I thought so my book, All In, came out on the 1st of June. And that was probably the most worrying part of it, describing my childhood, because I wanted to be open and honest, but I didn't want to make my dad sound like he was the worst person in the world. And actually, like, one of my biggest reliefs was when I gave him a copy of the book, and he rang and said, oh, it sounds like I didn't do too bad of a job. And I was thinking, whew, you. Because, describe a lot of, tough times in there. And it was very much about the winning for my dad and effort as well. And as long as I gave maximum effort, he was okay. But it was about winning, and my mum was the other side, didn't really care too much about whether I won or lost, but as long as I was happy. And there's a huge amount of positives that came from that. I think we've spoken about it a lot, and I've spoken to my coach about it, that one of the probably the top thing about making it in any professional sport is top of the list, hate to lose. And I think that that's most professional athletes, and certainly my coach, who has produced multiple world champions and world number ones, said it's top of his list. And I hated to lose. So I think my dad gave me a lot of that. He gave me a lot of discipline from his army background. But the downside was that I also had a huge amount of fear of failure when I first set out on tour. And it really took me a lot of years to balance out that fear of failure against like hating to lose and wanting to win all the time. And it took me a long time to finally realise that I could enjoy squash, play well, and hopefully still win.
Yeah.
And when I got that balance right, I started to enjoy it. I started to win more. I started to be a lot more expressive on court, and then things started to come together. And I think that's probably one of the reasons I peaked. I was very successful very early, but I didn't win my major titles until kind of 28, which is quite late, I think.
Yeah, I was about to say that, and then you actually said it, afterwards. Was it, when you had that fear of failure, did your playing style then change when you were able to sort of loosen the shackles of that a little bit?
Yeah, and a lot of that was working psychologically, with people, away from squash and away from me, but also having Danny there all the time kind of I think the biggest thing that I learned was understanding myself and understanding my personality and the reasons behind why I behave the way that I do. And I think once I started to understand that, I started to be able to forgive myself a little bit more for the way that I behaved, the way that I wanted to run my training and my life. And I'm very much someone who does it the right way and can't understand people who don't, train hard and train well and follow programs and are diligent and committed and determined and all these. But I know a heck of a lot of successful athletes who can't do that because it's just not for them. And that's where you have to find your own way. So almost working towards my strengths of being committed and being determined and forgiving myself when maybe things didn't go quite right was certainly a shift as my career went on, I think.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it in my book, with the parents thing. Once you know the box you're in as a type of personality type-ish, without having a strict personality type in things, so it becomes an excuse for everything you do. You once you understand yourself and then you understand other types of people, you can kind of like laugh at yourself a bit more and accept the strength and the weakness of yourself. And I think from there you can that there's a bit more compassion for yourself and your style and even the way you play the sport and what you need in your other life as well. So I think that's a very important thing. I've got sun cream in my eye, sorry.
I very much had kind of an attitude of my rules for me, my rules for you. And when you think of something like that, like you can get very judgmental of yourself, you can get very judgmental of others, you can get angry at people for not doing things the way that you think they should be done. And I think one of the biggest shifts was almost like my rules for me, your rules for you, and being able to like let other people kind of do how they want to do. And it took pressure off me as well. Like I didn't have to be perfect all of a sudden. So for someone who's a personality, you're either listening to this thinking that's me, or you're thinking what is she on about? That line really helped me a lot. Kind of my rules for me, your rules for you.
Yeah, I think there's two things that have sort of cropped up, I guess, throughout this all the time. One goes back to this huge self-awareness piece, doesn't it? Whether we're talking about coaching or whether we're talking about parenting or whether we're talking being an athlete, how you grow as a person and become more aware of other people. And hopefully as you mature, you realise that, as you say, there's different ways, there's different personalities. There isn't a one-size-fits-all, which I guess then links back to the other bit that seems to have cropped up a lot, is that whatever we've talked about so far, and we've sort of tried to, talk about key messages or things we've learned and shared, is that it's all about context, isn't it? And as we keep saying, that what may work on my car journey home, for example, if we take the sports parenting one, may not work for somebody else. Likewise, my 5 years of failing on car journeys home until I finally got a grip of myself and had to change may be very different to what other people have done. But I guess the skill to all of this, and you, I think you did a good job with this in the book, Danny, with it in particular, was how it wasn't a hard and fast rule, but they were things that allowed people to reflect and then apply them back in their own family or in their own context, because that is different for people.
That's what I mean about the taking part and joining in your own life, your own decisions.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people say they want freedom and they want free choice, but when they're given it, they can't make a choice. So they just want to be told what to do. You know, like a career, they want to leave the jobs, but they can't, because they're like, what would I do with all this time? And I'll just get me back in the rat race. You know, I don't have to think. Yeah. You know, and it's hard to take part all the time in your decisions and change your mind, because you're not being told what the hard and fast rules are. You got to do it yourself, and I think that's good teaching. Actually, I think great teachers for critical thinking and self-awareness. I think you have got things to say and places to point, and you've got information, you know, and in some cases, you know, I don't want a relativist to fly my aeroplane, you know, build it. I want a flipping engineer. These are the facts. That's what happens with gravity. Yeah. You know, and if you press this button, we crash, and you know, you need it. But in coaching and people and teaching and educating, I think that there is a time and a place to say, do this, you know, a crisis, half time or something, do this, I'm telling you to do this, and listen to me and shut your mouth. I think there's a time for that. But predominantly it's you make the choice.
Yeah.
Like, I provided 3 or 4 options there, but you make the choice. What do you think? And I think for that, you know, it's hard for parents and it's hard for educators, because a lot of children don't want to engage with that level of responsibility, because the children, they just want to get up and be children and just play, and we over make it too serious, because we know in our life 1 year feels like a year, maybe 10 years starts to feel like 1 year. But in a child's life, 1 year feels like 10 years.
Yeah.
So the difference from when they're 12 to 13, you know, is massive, and from 13 to 17 might as well be 40 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's absolutely, huge.
So they always think that they've got time on their hands to grow and develop. Well, we're panicking for them because they've not got it yet, and they need to learn quick. So we're always jamming down wisdom and information at them to grow up, or else. And really, they kind of just need to be left to still be children, and you trust them, but not so left alone that they haven't been access to some of that pushing along, and that's where it's tough.
Look, it is a tough balance. You know, glad my son's not here. He normally accuses me of name dropping on these podcasts, and I've had a few guests on before. But if he'd been here, it's interesting, because he said to my wife, because I'm around on a Saturday morning a little bit now, because I'm not working Saturdays like I used to, so I'm around a bit more. And he said to my wife, he said, "Oh, just because Dad's around, I hope it means that I'm still going to get my few hours in my pajamas watching the American wrestling and doing that." And he's got a really busy week, because he knows I'll get to about 10 o'clock and it'll be all right with him doing that to start the morning. And then it'll get to 10 o'clock and it's like, well, how are you going to productively use the next 2 hours? Well, hang on a minute, he's 11. He doesn't need to productively use the 2 hours on a Saturday when I've sort of filled it. But it goes back to what you're saying, and it's just a constant. It's that constant battle. And I think as you get better and you see them develop and you see them happy, you begin just to sort of get a bit like parenting, a bit like we were talking about with coaching either. I think you take a sort of deep breath and realize, actually, you know what, it's not that important. Just chill out, just chill out a bit, and just, you know.
Two of the philosophers that I really like that I included in the study were Simone de Beauvoir from France and Friedrich Nietzsche. And in different ways, they both talk about childhood as being absolutely vital, in that ultimately Nietzsche suggested that we metamorphise from the camel, where everything's put on our backs, to the lion, where we give a big roar to life and we go out and we do everything and achieve and fight systems and, you know, stand our ground and make things happen, and then ultimately return to the child, where we've sort of just get playful again and relax and see just like, you know, and we're still involved, but we make all our own new rules, our own ways of living. We chill out. We're not as panicking about our image and this latest fashion. And basically you grow old gracefully in some ways by returning to the child, not thinking that you're 25 all your life. What de Beauvoir said was what adults really want to do is, in a weird way, is return to the childlike state because it was easy, because it was uncomplicated and non-ambiguous. Because it was basically a lovely nostalgic memory of you hadn't had that, you know, that weight on your shoulders of being an adult, and all that, and knowing your future and all this type of stuff and responsibility. So I think that anything that you can do to keep yourself light and fun and non-serious and so on, that sounds easier to say than do. But I think we all intuitively in ourselves would have our own little ways that we know when we go back to feeling a little bit warm and childish and nostalgic and light and playful. And I think that's a good habit to try and tap into once or twice a week, or as much as you can, regardless of your circumstances. Because, you know, and that could be simple things like, if you're an adult, getting out with your own friends a bit more. So the banter and they drag you back down to the memories and will drag you up to the memories of childhood, and you don't get so overcomplicating everything and being too serious, and you remember what it was like. So I think to rob children of those years that ultimately everybody wants to kind of the pinnacle state on a Saturday morning, don't rob him of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you're the serious adult.
Yeah.
But then you might have a rule where you say you can have 5 hours of that and I'm not bothered. But John Trower, who was Steve Backley's coach for years, he was in the book. And one thing I remember him saying was brilliant. He said one of the things that sort of set the discipline in the background, so it wasn't all about, you know, complete Peter Pan stuff, you know, childhood. He said Saturdays I could do whatever I wanted. Mum and Dad, do what you want. Sundays were their day, and they had me. So I had to go in their car to their church, to their, you know, sisters or my aunties, play with my cousins, get home, have their food, go have a bath, get to bed, and it were like Sundays were a nightmare. He says, but it taught me that I could have Saturdays for me, and the adults had that. He said I was under the line. He says I could be put under the line on a day, but the other day I was free to rule the world. Yeah. He said, and that lesson was, I think, in his experience of 50 years of coaching and working with people, when you talk about a good upbringing or the background, he said he feels that was vital. That there are times where you're the child, we're the adults, you do what we say, shut up. And I still see that in Egypt a lot, who were very successful in squash. That hierarchy still exists a lot, but equally there's a lot of playfulness and love there, and they're allowed times where they're totally out on their own.
Yeah.
Whereas I think in the West, in America and Britain, it's like 24/7, like either, you know, interference really. It's in the middle. It's not one way or the other. We're a bit scared of this is our day, you do everything we say and shut your mouth. Yeah. You're under our control kind of thing. Yeah. So, Saturday's your day, go and do what you want, I don't care.
I think you see that a lot, certainly with young people and work with young people, that the lack of patience they maybe have or the ability to stick at a task in some cases now is due to that sort of, you know, everything has to be instant. They haven't had mum and dad say, well, no, actually, you're going to do nothing for the next 3 hours because we're doing this and you've just got to stand around and there's no devices. You know, all the stuff we used to have to do that drove us mad. You know, that carries real value. That actually carries real value. I mean, you don't think it does. I mean, it's pretty grim, but we didn't even think about it like that. We just did it. Whereas what you notice now is they haven't got it, but then I think that can have an impact on some of the other skills that they need.
Look, and that, you know, as much as Laura said her dad was about the winning and he was about this and it was pressure, one of the things I saw the most was it was also about, it's Sunday, 1 o'clock. You're doing the garden for 2 hours. End of story. you are tidying your room up, and until you've done that, you're not doing this. And it was there was a line that you didn't cross, you know, and you just had to do it because you're helping out the family tribe. It's like your duty, and it's not about you; it's about the team.
Yeah.
And you just do it because you're a kid and you have to take part. And so I you know, that kind of stuff is, you know, that's the stuff that's up to the family, isn't it? And how they want to bring their kids up. But it doesn't half help when they come to coaching and they've got, and you say as a coach, there's some information. If you go and practice this movement or you go and practice this, then you can get that.
Yeah.
Or then if they're automatically used to tuning in and being ordered to do things but not feel like a victim, or okay, I'll do it for you, it's more like, no, I'll do it because it's a duty to do it. Then it's simpler, isn't it? They just do the practice and they don't feel like, you know, they deserve a load of reward for it. They just got something you've got to do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not none of that reward or making the world a brilliant place all the time. And one that always interests me, and it doesn't annoy me, but you know, sometimes when I've known people well or questioned it, sometimes is when parents have been at a sports event with the kid, and then the adult gets chucked on the back seat while they sit in the front, as though they're the most important just because they've been in an under-9 football game. Now, I get that sometimes it's cool, maybe if you've decided you're going to be with dad, you're going to play music, you're about to go somewhere, and there's that dialogue going on. But there's sometimes where that's very much no, this is all about you, and it's all like you're all on a pedestal, and actually, you know, and there's mum sort of chucked in the back corner of the car while the 9-year-old has the front seat. And look, it's in itself, that's not really a big deal. It's an observation, but actually, it doesn't always send out the right messages either.
No, I mean, I just think that, like what Danny just said, the kid generally has to sort of know their place a little bit, because if you don't know it within your own family, then there's certainly when it comes to an elite sport, there's a pecking order that comes with things. And if you try and leapfrog some of that pecking order, it doesn't get you very far. So whether it's at school or at home or wherever, you've got to have a little bit of, you know, respect for your elders, and you know, a little bit of discipline instilled. I don't think otherwise you end up with spoiled adults, don't you? I think it's as simple as that, really.
It's a skill you haven't learned how to sort of bite the bullet and get through it.
Yeah.
It's like having a part-time job that you don't want when you're younger for not much money, but if you want that money and you want that, you have to do this.
Yeah.
So it's like an acquired skill. It's the skill to get over yourself, do the work, get your little bit of a reward, and just keep doing it. And if you've never been exposed to that, like if you have been exposed to it, you take it for granted as just, well, you like everyone has that. But if you've never been put through that or seen it in your parents as an example, you're going to find it difficult to enjoy sports, because, as I said earlier, sport will test you. And the moment it gets a little bit hard, or you lose, or you get a bit embarrassed, or you have a bad round of golf, or something happens, or you can't hit the ball that day, or you get out at cricket, or, you know, and even if it's amateur, you just lose your head.
Yeah.
You know, you can't cope because you have this big tantrum. And you're not used to thinking, I think it's time, I do need to go and look after my practice, and I do need to go and hit a few more, put a little bit more in to get the basic return.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's where, you know, the basic thing we're talking about here is sport. And sport's challenging, and it's hard, and it makes a fool of you, because you always play it to a level that is a challenge, otherwise it'd be boring.
Yeah.
So you always play it to a level that should be slightly just, if I just win, it'll be great. But if I lose, I'll be a bit gutted. So you're always at that little bit, if it's competition, not pastime.
Yeah.
And no matter where you are on that level, whether it's top pro or, you know, local town, village level, then if you've not been brought up where you've been put under the line for a minimal reward, and you have to go and do this to get that, as a very simple thing, it's hard for you to accept information, it's hard when you don't win, you sulk with the sport, and I'm not playing again, and you might never play it for 25 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just as you're saying that and talking a huge amount of sense, I'm still picturing stacking those shelves at 16 to earn enough money to go away on night shifts in a bakery. So you brought back a bit of a nightmare there, Danny. Now, I'm just conscious of time. Final question. Many congratulations on the impending arrival that you've got coming. How are you going to approach their sport and physical activity? Now, the reason I want to ask this is because it'd be brilliant if I got you back on in about a decade's time and said, how is that playing out? Now, how are you going to approach it? Is it have you decided the squash will be in there, or are you going to let them decide? How is it? What we thinking?
I mean, I don't think we've massively discussed it. The way that I'm getting kicked in my ribs at the moment is probably, could either be a swimmer or a footballer or something. I mean, I very much appreciate my parents giving me the opportunity to play a lot of sports. I swam to club level. Obviously played squash outside of school, but then played everything within school as well. And I think that was hugely, I think it was beneficial for my squash. Not that not that you were doing it for that reason at the time, but you start to realise what it is you want from sport as well. I knew very early that I didn't want to be a swimmer. I didn't want to do the early mornings. I didn't want to look at the bottom of a pool. But I also didn't want to play a team sport, and part of it was obviously linked in with a bit of success. So I think personally it's about just creating opportunity from quite an early age, and who knows why we end up in the sports that we do. Danny was a bit different in that I can probably beat him at swimming and squash when I was pro, probably not anymore, and that's about it. But he can pick up a tennis racket, table tennis, snooker cue, pool cue, football, you name it, like he can do it. So I think there's something, although never professional in any sport, there's something to be said to having that all-rounded skill as well. So
yeah, as long as far back as I can remember, I was never that confident as a kid, but I always had friends and on sport. Because of sport, could play a little snooker tournaments, football teams, blah blah blah. Golf. So I think that was my saving thing. So in terms of, and then ultimately how sports affected my life, studying it and all these things. So yeah, I think it's obviously the child's going to be exposed to sports, but might be into music or languages or whatever, or you don't know.
From a squash perspective, I don't know whether or not I'd prefer to not know much about the sport. I mean, for me, get into, I don't know, hockey or something that I'm clueless about, and otherwise it becomes very much I mean, you see it a lot in all sports. There's a comparison there for one. If it's the same sport, there's, the kid either absolutely loves it or absolutely hates it until they get to a certain age. You see that with a lot of really good squash players who've had kids who... Yeah. The kids don't want to embrace the fact that the parent was world number one or world champion because, they're just mum, aren't they, or dad.
Yeah, well, I was just about...
They're an age and they do.
Yeah.
I was just about to say that's a lovely way to finish, because one thing I can guarantee you, Laura, having had loads of people on this podcast in similar situations, is they will place absolutely no value for a long time on whether you were the world champion, which I think's really cool, but they really won't care. And I guess if that's any grounding for making parenting fun, then that's probably a good way to finish. So listen, thank you so much for being so giving of your time. It's been an absolute pleasure to welcome you onto the podcast, and I sincerely look forward to chatting again sometime soon.
Yeah.
Great, thanks for having us on.
Thank you for listening. Check us out at parentsinsport.co.uk.